Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first edition of the off-season report of the off-season at Lettermen Row for the Ohio State Buckeyes. That is Tim May, the 40-year vet. On the other side of that screen, that is Andy Backstrom. Of course, you know us. You might love us by now, but you love the Ohio State Buckeyes, which is why we thank you for being here watching all of our content at lettermenrow.com and on the Lettermen Row YouTube channel. Tim, Andy, big news out of Columbus. First and foremost, on Wednesday morning, Will Howard, the Kansas State transfer quarterback, will be visiting the Ohio State Buckeyes. He's expected to visit in the coming days. Pete Thamel from ESPN First to report that Lettermen Row has confirmed that news. The Buckeyes are expected to host Will Howard on an official visit. After seeing what we saw in the Cotton Bowl, this is not surprising. We thought it might happen even before we saw what we saw in the Cotton Bowl. But Tim, Andy, actually, Andy, I'll start with you this time. Then we'll go to Tim because I know Tim's got thoughts. What do you think about this news that Will Howard and Ohio State have mutual interest to the point of a visit?
There have been rumblings about Will Howard now for quite a bit, so this is really not too surprising to us. That being said, I think you need to have a veteran quarterback at this point being brought in. He's clearly experienced. He's won a Big 12 title rather, and been at Kansas State for quite a long time, put up the stats, he stayed healthy, and all those things are important for a really important year for Ryan Day and his staff. I don't know what the staff's going to look like. We're expecting maybe there'll be changes there as well. You're going to need to have consistency, but also durability at the quarterback position. And with the way that the Cotton Bowl went and the way the season went for Devin Brown, it's just hard to say that you can guarantee him being healthy for all 12 games of the regular season and then a postseason that could be longer with the expanded playoff. So it just makes sense to bring in someone else. That being said, I don't think this is an indictment of Devin Brown or Lincoln Kienholz and what we saw from them, because still don't think that was a fair evaluation of either of those two guys. And I still think that we need to talk more about how the offensive line, no matter who they bring in at quarterback, is a major concern for this football team right now.
I
Tim?
was making all kinds of head movements, agreeing with you and affirming your negatives with a head shake like this. And Will Howard pick Ohio State. You like that headline?
Yeah.
I had people come up to me on the sideline before the game in the Cotton Bowl in Jerry World there, AT&T Stadium, in and around the Ohio State program. Feeling really good about the Will Howard situation because he's being sold on it's going to be a competitive deal. Ryan Day doesn't promise anybody a job, and I think he's been pretty consistent about that. But you touched the main thing. We didn't get to see a fair representation of what either Devin Brown or Lincoln Kienholz bring to the table because of the way they were being harassed all night. That was, like I've been on record as saying, that was one of the worst displays of offensive line or pass pro I can remember in Ohio State history. Maybe the Fiesta Bowl in 2016, the semifinal of the college football playoff, when Ohio State got shut out 31-0 by Clemson. Ferocious pass rush by Clemson. But that should be job one in this offseason of nailing a quality, at least one quality offensive lineman to join the group, perhaps two, and we'll see where that goes. But Will Howard, yeah, I mean, just turn on the video. This guy brings a lot to the table. He would at least be competitive in that room, at least I say. So, it makes a lot of sense that you've zeroed in on that fellow when maybe some other guys you were interested in made up their minds quickly on where they were headed. It looks like Will Howard looks to be the real deal, and like I said, could at least juice up that room.
Yeah, Big 12 championship. He has a lot of stats and accolades from the Big 12. His best weapon that he threw to in 3 or 4 years there was Deuce Vaughn, who's a 5'9", 5'10" running back. So we haven't really seen him with a full complement of elite weapons like he would have at Ohio State if he does choose to pick Ohio State. One thing that I would say about Will Howard is he brings an element of the running game that I don't think Ohio State has had since Braxton Miller, and that's not an indictment on anybody's running game. I thought JT Barrett was a good runner. I think Will Howard's quicker. I thought CJ Stroud was a capable runner. Ohio State didn't have him do it. Cardale Jones was a powerful runner. I think Will Howard has the most athleticism that you'll see in a quarterback If he does choose Ohio State, you don't see a quarterback that often at Ohio State that has his athleticism. He has a lot of rushing yards under his belt. And the read option is a major, major part of what Kansas State did with him. We saw a run heavy game plan from Ohio State on Friday night in the Cotton Bowl. That involved a lot of quarterback run. Ryan Day even said as much. That's why he went to Lincoln Kienholz and not Tristan Gebbia, because the game plan demanded heavy quarterback run. Well, guess who fits that game plan style perfectly? That's Kansas State's Will Howard. And so if that's the game plan that you're going to employ or deploy, I guess, for a Cotton Bowl, there's no reason you couldn't do it for 12 or 13 or 14 or even 16 games in the new playoff format with Will Howard and try to win a national championship. So, yeah, it's just a visit, but it's not just a visit. You don't bring a guy, especially at quarterback, knowing the stir that it's going to cause in your room, in for an official visit unless you feel really good about where he is. So I think this is a domino that's going to continue to knock other dominoes over, for this, not just this roster, but for college football. You know, anytime Ohio State gets a new starter, potentially, that's huge. And so it'll send shockwaves. Even the notion of a visit will send shockwaves. But like you guys said, like, it's not just quarterback that Ohio State has to add in the portal, Andy. Um, there are quite a few positions of need for Ohio State. Not a lot of roster spots, but enough roster spots. I think there's 5 or 6. According to the roster count that I have, there could be a couple more. The portal's still open until Wednesday night. So when you look at this roster, Andy, what else needs addressed here for Ohio State?
I think it's funny. I saw some people on Twitter saying, Ohio State's a quarterback and a few offensive linemen away from playing in a national championship this year. Well, those are the most important positions on the field, arguably. So yes, I think there's a lot to do. Quarterback is certainly at the head of that, and so is offensive line. I think when you're looking at the offensive line, you're going to bring back a lot of guys. That doesn't necessarily mean that a guy's going to get better from year 1 to year 2 as a starter. Sometimes it is the case. Sometimes they do make a jump, and I think you could play around with that. You also have Justin Fry's guys he recruited, brought in. We didn't see a lot of this year. We saw the most of Luke Montgomery, but the other 3 we didn't see any of. And so you're going to maybe see those guys develop. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But I do think you need to attack the portal, as Tim mentioned, for offensive linemen. I know we talked all last year about how difficult that is, but it's been done before around the country. I mean, it's not like impossible to at least bring in some guys. And they tried it with Victor Cutler, who gave a run at that center competition, didn't end up winning. And of course, they brought in Josh Simmons, who ended up starting at left tackle. So I think they need to have at least 1 or 2 offensive linemen that they bring in to, at the very least, just up this competition and push the guys that are already in those spots. Because I don't think they can just go say, hey, the 4 that we're bringing back, everyone but Matt Jones that's coming back, hey, you're just going to be a starter. Like, I think they need to have something look different for this group, or at least try to.
Absolutely. And there have been several what I'd call quality wide receivers jump into the portal. Maybe not to the height of a Jeremiah Smith or something like that, but with the guys who have left the wide receiver room, I would think you're looking at least for 1 wide receiver just from a number standpoint. I know they got these great guys coming in. They're going to be freshmen. Jeremiah Smith, man, those videos from San Antonio, he looks ready to play without a doubt. And Mylan Graham, the same thing. But I would think they would look at least 1 or 2 more, at least 1 wide receiver, just to give you numbers, quality numbers, experience numbers. Maybe is a better way of putting it, in that wide receiver room. If we're just sticking with offense now, and of course, Spencer's favorite pickup so far in the portal, tight end from Ohio University. You can get into him later, but that looks like a sound pickup. I know it's just from right down the road in Ohio University, but you watch this young man's video, and I think he looks quality. I was ribbing Spencer before we started this video about him, just because I like to see Spencer squirm. But I think there is a plan to what they're doing. The key here is recruiting from the transfer portal, and Will Howard is, I think, is case number 1.
Yeah, it's interesting, Tim, that you bring up wide receiver because the Buckeyes, according to Brian Hartline and Ryan Day, and talking about roster management over the years with those two, they want to have 10, 11 guys in that wide receiver room. Right now, as it stands,
Yep.
they would have eight. And that's well, two under when you're talking about 10, that's 20% of the room. You don't want that. And you can't have that. Now they do have a couple walk-ons that they think are pretty quality that can help them during practice, but you want the depth of the product, and it's not just about the Jeremiah Smiths and the potential of Emeka Ibuka and what you're going to get from Carnell Tate and Brandon Innes. You got to have guys at the bottom of the roster who are going to play your scout team that are going to give your defense a good look. I completely agree. They could probably stand to bring in a wide receiver. Now, that's going to be really tough. You can sell somebody on learning under Brian Hartline, but you can't sell somebody on playing time whatsoever in that wide receiver
Yeah.
room. It's just a fact. Offensive
Can
line.
I interject?
Yeah.
A couple of guys have made a mistake though, jumping in the portal from Ohio State. I'm not necessarily going to name names, but they're obvious. I'm talking about from the wide receiver room, and I'm just going, you know, uh, some things don't make sense to me that that you go from a place that has generated the kind of receivers Ohio State has. Some guys you heard a lot of coming in the door. Some guys you didn't, but still excelled, like Chris Olave was a 3-star at best. And just don't understand giving up on the Ohio State aspect of things so quickly. You know what I mean? And obviously there are people involved in this, from family to probably your agent, your handler, whatever you want to call it, who are involved in a lot of this stuff. But some of this stuff kind of doesn't make sense. And I'm talking about for the good of that player in particular. So I just want to get my 2 cents worth in on that before you plug another quarter into the machine here.
Yeah, it was kind of hard to, it was a little puzzling, Tim, when you look at guys who, knew that they were not going to play in year one at Ohio State, really no matter what. And then
Right.
all of a sudden after year one, they're like, hey, I'm going to go find a better opportunity. Well, you didn't really give yourself much of an opportunity at the first stop. But I mean, I'm not going to criticize any kid's decision. Every
Right,
kid.
right. I'm just making an overall statement. You know what I mean? Not, you do what you got to do, right? Go ahead.
Yeah. And then Andy, like you said, the offensive line, you got to bring some bodies in. You got to figure this thing out. Right now, I think that the scholarship crunch at offensive line looks a little not great. I have 16 right now on my scholarship count. Offensive linemen projected to be back. That includes Donovan Jackson, who I've penciled in as back, not penned in or sharpied in. I think he will be back. So 16 offensive linemen's a lot. I don't know where you go from there, but you need to keep bringing guys in that are going to push the room. But 16 is a lot. And then, like you said, Tim, Will Kasmerick. I'm still trying to figure out the pronunciation on the name, because every time I even watched a Bobcats game, which I watched a lot of them, somebody was saying it differently. So you
Yeah.
just don't know. I've been told by Ohio State sources that they expect him to play a large role right away. I've been told by an Ohio source that he is the epitome of a hard worker. He's a quiet kid. He loves football. You're going to get a really good kid who just wants to play football at the highest level. And he was one of the best blocking tight ends, not only in the MAC, but now in the transfer portal. Ohio State scoops him up because they know that's what they need. You don't need a receiving tight end when you've got the potential of Jelani Thurman. You've got what G. Scott showed in the receiving game this year. Bennett Christian's a big target who's going to be back next year. Demarion Witten's a borderline wide receiver. He could alleviate some of the pain there at wide receiver of losing those guys. And Max LeBlanc's going to be a rotational guy in the future, but also somebody who's going to need a year to develop. I think Will Kasmerick fits a need perfectly right where you needed one, as an inline blocker in 12 personnel. He's going to do well. As we flip the page over to the defensive side, Andy, is
Wait,
there?
wait, wait, wait a minute. Before we flip the page, did I really hear the two words Jelani Thurman come out of your mouth?
Yeah, I'm expecting a year two jump, Tim, after starting in the Cotton Bowl and only playing 2 snaps. A year two jump would be a delight for me to watch from Jelani Thurman.
Amen, brother. I'm telling you, walks by me on the sideline. I'm just going, you got to figure out some way to get this guy in the game. There, I'll leave it at that. Now go ahead.
Andy, defensively, any holes that you see defensively that need addressed in the transfer portal as the thing closes up here tonight, January 3rd?
Yeah, I mean, just briefly, I think running back is a spot on offense. They could add someone in. Right now, they're projected to have 4 running backs. That's if Travion Henderson does return, then you have Dallin Hayden and the 2 new guys that they're bringing in. James Peoples and Sam Williams-Dixon. So they like to be 4 or 5. I think they'd be more comfortable with 5. So that's just another position to be keeping in mind. But then for the defense side of the ball, I think defensive end is a position that, like you said, with wide receiver, it's hard to sell playing time there because you could have two top guys, not only at Ohio State, but in the Big Ten and maybe college football returning at the position. We don't know yet what they're going to do with their decisions, but if they did return, you bring in someone else, it's hard to sell them on, hey, you'll play here, but the depth is not great at that position right now. We saw them move over Arvell Reese in training camp to the defensive end position. I think that was partly to bolster the depth at defensive end. It seems like Arvell Reese has since returned to linebacker because that's the way that Jim Knowles was talking about him in the lead up to the Cotton Bowl. So I'm questioning, what's the depth at that edge position? Even if those two come back and JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, what are you doing beneath that? I know you got Kenyatta Jackson, you've got Caden Curry and Mitchell Melton, but there's just not a lot of names at that pivotal position. So defensive end is kind of, I guess digging my antenna right now. I mean, what do you guys think?
Tim?
Yo, Kenyatta Jackson, what posted that kind of cryptic X? Is that what we call it now? X
Yeah.
tweet sounds a lot better than an X. Decisions. Not sure what that's all about. Caden Curry, is going to be back. Mitchell Melton just sort of like disappeared, as far as viable playing time this year. And, we were all hyped on him a year and a half ago about being that key ingredient for the new Jim Knowles defense. And, and of course, they've moved on from that. But I agree with you. I think defensive end is a place they need some bodies or a body. Let's put it that way. I think if you get a quality dude out of the transfer portal in that regard, I think you're doing well. So that's my take. Just one body, you know what I mean? Doesn't have you're not going to find two of the caliber that you're searching for at Ohio State to come out of the portal, but lure one. Get the NIL cranked up, whatever it takes. But uh, I agree with you, and it's funny, man. I don't mean to digress, but I, I I was very impressed with the effort given by the defense against Missouri. As I wrote that story, they held Missouri well below its scoring average for the year. The fourth quarter leaves something to be desired, but man, there were. I know a lot of people are looking at Jack Sawyer's numbers and JT Tuimoloau. Where did he go? I think JT Tuimoloau had a hell of a game from where I was watching. Just because you don't get the sacks doesn't mean you didn't put in the effort. And Ty Hamilton right on down the line. I mean, I was impressed by the way the defensive line played, but it's a new year now.
Yeah, a lot of those guys are going to be back, Tim,
I know.
from what we've been hearing. Some good news coming potentially for the Ohio State defensive line, which is why I think the only place on the defense, and I'm not disagreeing with Andy, you could bring in a defensive end, or you can maneuver your way into having another defensive end, whether that's Arvell Reese going back in that defensive end room. He looked good there and fluid there in practice.
Yeah.
Whether that's finally realizing that CJ Hicks is probably more of a roamer than he is a true linebacker. We saw him against Purdue. We saw him against Missouri at the linebacker position. It didn't look great, I'll be honest. And so does he become a better defensive end? Jim Knowles gave a long-winded answer during Cotton Bowl prep about needing to do a better job this offseason of scouting CJ Hicks and figuring out where he fits into the defense, because he certainly fits somewhere. And he's the kind of player.
He could be a disruptor on the lines of Micah Parsons or whatever. I know we had that analogy not just because of his number, but he definitely has the talent to be a disruptor somewhere on the field. Don't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And so Jim Knowles has a tall task of figuring out where that best is. Where does Sonny Styles fit into this? If CJ Hicks or Arvell Reese become a defensive end or become a pass rusher, then does Sonny Styles become a linebacker? Because I think he looks way better at linebacker right now than he does at deep safety. And Ohio State continues to say he's going to be a good deep safety. I have my doubts. And so the only position on the defense that I see that could use a transfer portal addition once you start scouting your roster is safety. Because
I agree.
If you begin to slide guys down and fit them where they actually fit naturally on the football field, instead of having a 6'4", 240-pound safety, you have a 6'4", 235, 40-pound defensive end linebacker combo or something like that, then you probably need another safety and not a defensive end or a linebacker. So I think if the Buckeyes play their cards correctly or play their cards strategically, they could be looking at only needing one person, one transfer addition on the entire defense. And that could be in the back end at safety to help Jihad Carter and to help some of those other guys who are going to need to play a large role in this defense. Malik Hartford, like, people I've talked to said, they're going to be picky at safety and only bring a guy in who helps them immediately. I completely agree with that. But at the same time, I think you need somebody, not just want to look for somebody who can help you immediately. I think you need
The
somebody who can help you.
the last 2 years they've done just that. And then Jihad Carter got obviously banged up. I mean, Tanner McAllister was a good fit for that defense. I think you agree. Of course, he followed Jim Knowles from Oklahoma State, and yeah, you're exactly right. When you really total it up of not necessarily the numbers that they've got listed, but where guys could end up, that's a great point.
Andy?
Yeah, safety is definitely one of those immediate needs. But I think defensive end, I was just saying for long term, and if one of those guys goes down, let's say you bring back both JT and Jack Sawyer, and then unfortunately, one goes down. That's just football, right? At some point, Ohio State got really lucky with injuries this year on the defensive front and the offensive front. To have that
Yes.
year after year is just not realistic. So you got to plan for the worst case scenario. And you need to have a guy that not only could be okay with staying around, like look at Lorenzo Styles Jr. Comes in okay with the fact that he was redshirted this year, but maybe will play a role. He played a couple snaps in the Cotton Bowl. Maybe will play a role down the line at cornerback. They need a guy like that who can be a defensive end, be okay with, hey, I need to develop. Tywone Malone, they did the same thing at defensive tackle. Someone like that adds depth. They are capable of playing if they need to, but it's okay if they're also stored away. So I think that defensive end for me is more long term and more immediate. You're right, safety for sure. We also need to see what Lathan Ransom does with his decision. He's another guy who could leave for the NFL. I think that kind of informs what Ohio State needs to do at safety as well. And you have to be excited about some of those young guys headlined by Malik Hartford. But I think that linebacker, corner, I think corner is very sound. I think linebacker, you can make things work. It's only two people playing as well in this scheme. And defensive tackle, I think they should be fine. I'm pretty, I'd be pretty excited if I'm a Ohio State fan about some of the young guys at defensive tackle. Jason Moore, Hero Canoe. Those are guys, in addition to Ty Hamilton and potentially Tyleik Williams, that you have to be really optimistic about.
Yeah, and then I'm looking down in San Antonio right now, and the things that Edric Houston's doing to high-level offensive line recruits are against the Geneva Convention. I mean, this guy is wrecking offensive linemen who are supposed to be going to the top level programs, guys who Ohio State fans would be ecstatic to be signing on the offensive line. Edric Houston is making them look like school children. So if he came in next week and decided to become a part of the Ohio State equation at defensive end, I don't think anybody would say no, but I also don't think anybody would be surprised.
No.
So those are the kind of guys that you look down at your recruiting class and say, hey, maybe the transfer portal is not all it's cracked up to be when we can go get this guy out of the middle of Georgia, pluck him out and throw him onto our roster. And as a true freshman, he can make an impact. Larry Johnson doesn't love playing freshmen, but when a freshman needs to play, he's a guy. And we're going to get into all that, of course, at lettermenrow.com. But before we get out of here, fellas, I did want to tell you guys about a little something I like to call Game Time, the Game Time app and gametime.co. It's the best place to go buy tickets. Right now, I'm watching the Sugar Bowl the other night, and all of a sudden I get an ad on my TV for the Game Time app and gametime.co. Game Time is taking over. And right now you can get $20 off your first purchase of any Buckeyes tickets. You want to go watch the Buckeyes hoops team? They're playing really well. Cross your fingers because it's January, but they're playing really well right now. You can go watch them, get $20 off your tickets, and then go watch the Buckeyes. They also do this thing. Tim, I know you love it.
Yeah. Yeah. If you find the same ticket in the same aisle, same general area, relatively small general area, but general area of where you get your ticket from Game Time and it's cheaper on another site, you'll get 110% of the difference back from Game Time in the Game Time app. And of course, as always, Spencer, terms apply. Read that fine print. It's good that we've got the son of a lawyer on our team here, Anders Backstrom. But yeah, Game Time is the fastest growing aftermarket ticking spot in the country. And like I always say on my commercial for him on the Tim May show, it can be a late minute addition where oh my goodness, I was told my son I was going to take him to the Ohio State game tonight, but you can also be planning ahead for the the U.S. Figure Skating Championships, which are coming to Columbus the last week of January at Nationwide Arena. As I said on my app, on my show, I don't want to necessarily mention the prices for those tickets because it is quite the exclusive event. But if you want to take someone, Game Time has got you covered.
Yeah, and you can get $20 off your first purchase in the Game Time app when you use the promo code Buckeyes at checkout. That's right. That's easy. Buckeyes at checkout. $20 off your first purchase in the Game Time app. Fellas, let's get out of here. We've got 2 months until spring practice begins. Just 2 months. We've got about 60 days of free time before the Buckeyes hit the practice field for the 2024 edition of spring practice. Until then, we're going to be covering the transfer portal, NFL draft decisions, the NFL Combine, the draft prep. Pro day will be during that. A lot of coverage coming at lettermenrow.com, including hoops coverage from the man over there, Andy Backstrom. Got a lot more coming on the Ohio State football roster, the Ohio State football team, Matt Parker and Alex Gleitman over on the recruiting side. What can we say? We're doing the best job we can trying to cover those Buckeyes. Go get it right now. $1 for your first month at lettermenrow.com, the Lettermen Row YouTube channel. We'll see you guys over at lettermenrow.com. We'll see you guys back whenever we need to break down the Buckeyes here on the Lettermen Row YouTube channel.